The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 12th webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. With this webinar, we enter our second year together. This webinar series will be available on makara.us under Moria Federation webinars under the subheading Webinar Series in Progress. Both this and the Secret Doctrine series are also now available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald Secret Teachings or Secret Doctrine to find this series. Okay, let's start with a quick review. Last month was our second webinar on Gnosticism, which can be described as a form of esoteric Christianity, in part due to its adoption of Platonic and Neoplatonic ideas. The three great Gnostic philosopher teachers were the Syrian Simon Magus, who most historians consider to be the founder of Gnosticism, the Egyptian Basilides, who introduced the god Abraxas, and Valentinius, who first taught in Alexandria, but later moved to Rome. Irenaeus, the church father, attributes the Gnostic gospel of truth to Valentinius, which was lost after his death, but rediscovered as part of the 1945 Nag Hammadi discovery. Today's session starts on page 26. We've turned the page with text that cites a quote from the Gnostics and their remains, which we'll read in association with the illustration it describes. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Michael, can you start us off with that, please?
Absolutely. In describing Abraxas, C.W. King says, Bellarmine considers the composite image, inscribed with the actual name Abraxas, to be a Gnostic pantheos, representing the Supreme Being, with the 5 emanations marked out by appropriate symbols. From the human body, the usual form assigned to the deity, spring 2 supporters, Nu and Logos, expressed in the serpents, symbols of the inner senses, and the quickening understanding, on which account the Greeks had made the serpent the attribute of Pallas. His head, that of a cock, represents Phronesis, that bird being the emblem of foresight and of vigilance. His 2 arms hold the symbols of Sophia and Dynamis, the shield of wisdom and the whip of power.
So any thoughts or questions about this description? The attributes assigned to Abraxas suggest that he was considered to be a solar creator god, a kind of Gnostic Brahma. Most of these attributes we've seen before. Logos, initiator of the creative word. Nu, or nous, that aspect of mind that allows one to discriminate between the real and the unreal, higher mind. Sophia, wisdom. Dynamis, a combination of causal power and the field of potential in which that power can be wisely demonstrated. And phronesis, a word unique to ancient Greece. That means virtuous or ethical action stemming from wisdom. Scholars have assigned a variety of meanings to Abraxas, from archon to god to eon to demon. But the most esoteric teachings seem to again come from Hippolytus, who says that according to Basilides, he's the Egyptian teacher, Abraxas is the power above all, the first principle, thus the cause and first archetype of all things, who, by giving birth to mind, nous, initiated the series of primary powers or syzygies, chief among these being the Christ and Sophia. Here are some additional early representations of Abraxas. The limestone relief on the right seems to be a kind of hybrid Abraxas, Hermes, and Anubis. But this is not by accident, for all the Mediterranean creator gods were seen to facilitate one's passage through the underworld, as we'll see in our study of Serapis, which is coming up. Here we have a drawing of the two sides of a red jasper talisman illustrated in the Gnostics and their remains. Could we get a reader for this?
I'll read it. The Abraxas god, as he is usually represented, with shield and whip to scare away all evil spirits. The reverse exhibits the, no I won't, the
Agathodemon.
There we go, serpent, surrounded by triplets of the sacred animals of Egypt, all paying him adoration. The legend in the field, Avia, is Syriac for serpent. The rest remains unexplained. Drawn to the actual size from a red jasper discovered at Bombay, to which place it had probably been carried by the Persian refugees of the 7th centuries.
Thanks, Bill. So, any thoughts or questions about this? Next, can we get a reader, please?
Yes, Scott, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted.
How about that?
You'll get there.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay. I'm reading the Gnostics in dark, right?
That's right.
Good. The Gnostics were divided in their opinions concerning the demiurgus, or creator of the lower worlds. He established the terrestrial universe with the aid of 6 suns, or emanations, possibly the planetary angels, which he formed out of and yet within himself. As stated before, the demiurgus was individualized as the lowest creation out of the substance called pleroma. One group of the Gnostics was of the opinion that the demiurgus was the cause of all misery and was an evil character or creature, who by building this lower world had separated the souls of men from truth by encasing them in mortal vehicles. The other sect viewed the demiurgus as being divinely inspired and merely fulfilling the dictates of the invisible Lord. Some Gnostics were of the opinion that the Jewish god Jehovah was the demiurgus. This concept, under a slightly different name, apparently influenced medieval Rosicrucianism, which viewed Jehovah as the Lord of the material universe rather than as the supreme deity. Mythology abounds with the stories of gods who partook of both celestial and terrestrial natures. Odin of Scandinavia is a good example of a deity subject to mortality, bowing before the laws of nature, yet being, in certain senses at least, a supreme deity.
So, any thoughts or questions come up from this paragraph? In Gnostic thought, the 6 suns or emanations all emanate from, quote, fire, unquote. As described in our last webinar, I remember going through this, they are in fact 3 pairs of male-female syzygies. Next, the 2 schools, one believing that the demiurgos was evil, the other holding it to be divinely inspired. This can be seen as an eso versus exoteric version of the same truth. The idea that the demiurgos is the cause of all misery and it is thus an evil creature is based on the involutional work of the demiurgos, actually in both cases. But it fails to take into account the role that involution and the material realm in general plays in extending the evolutionary path downward to the lower kingdoms. the idea that Jehovah is Lord of the material universe rather than the supreme deity is one of HPB's recurring themes. In fact, he seems to relish pointing this out. Can we get a reader for this quote from The Secret Doctrine?
Yes. Karen G., can you read that for us? You're self-muted.
Okay. The reader is asked to turn to stanza 4 of Book 1 and its fourth commentary to find that the 3, 4 through 7 and the thrice 7, or 1065, the number of Jehovah, is the number of the 21 Prajapati mentioned in the Mahabharata, or the 3 seraphim, words in cipher or figures. And this comparison between the creative powers of archaic philosophy and the anthropomorphic creator of exoteric Judaism, since their esotericism shows its identity with this secret doctrine, will lead the student to perceive and discover that in truth Jehovah is but a lunar and generation God.
Thanks, Karen. Okay. I've read a dozen such references to Jehovah in The Secret Doctrine. Those of you who have been following the Secret Doctrine series will recognize the subject matter here: the 1065, the 21 Prajapati. Right. This is the outer extension of the creative logos, and in the SD especially, HPB was fond of calling all generational gods, which means basically creator gods, as lunar, but they're also considered to be solar gods from another point of view. That is to say, the 7 and 1, who from which come in Gnostic thought, the 6 pairs of syzygies, right? So thanks for that. So Odin, the dual nature of the Scandinavian Odin, is expressed in part, because all through this we're talking with this dual quality of the demiurgus. It's all connected with the concept of the will to be. So you have the will aspect, pure deity, and you have the manifestation aspect, right? So in Scandinavian Odin, it's expressed in part, at least, through his maligned brother Loki, and we'll learn about him from the Secret Doctrine quote. Notice I superimpose this flame over Loki. Notice how he seems himself to be like a human representation of fire or the flame. So can we get a reader for this?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
Returning once more to the most important subject in the archaic cosmogony, it may be said that even in the Norse legends, in the sacred scrolls of the goddess saga, we find Loki, the brother by blood of Odin, as Typhon, Ahriman, and others are brothers of Osiris and Ormazd, becoming evil only later when he has mixed too long with humanity. Like all other fire or light gods, fire burning and destroying as well as warming and giving life, he ended by being accepted in the destructive sense of fire. The name Loki, we learn, Asgard and the gods, has been derived from the old word likan, to enlighten. It has therefore the same origin as the Latin lux, light. Hence, Loki is identical with Lucifer, light bringer. This title given to the Prince of Darkness is very suggestive and is a vindication in itself against theological slander. But Loki is still more closely related to Prometheus, as he is shown chained to a sharp rock, while Lucifer, identified with Satan, was chained down in hell. A circumstance, however, which prevented neither of them from acting in all freedom on earth, if we accept the theological paradox in its fullness. Loki is a beneficent, generous, and powerful god in the beginning of times, and the principle of good, not of evil, in early Scandinavian theogony.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Okay, and a reader for this section on Odin.
Lenore, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. You're still self-muted. Okay, let's go on to Lynn. Lynn, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. The Ases create the earth, the seas, the sky, and the clouds, the whole visible world from the remains of the slain giant Ymir. But they do not create man, but only his form from the ask or ash tree. It is Odin who endows him with life and soul, after Lodor had given him blood and bones, and finally it is Honir who furnishes him with his intellect, manas, and with his conscious senses.
Thanks, Lynn. So it's tempting to get into this, but this is just a taste. We have an entire section coming up on this subject called the Odinic Mysteries. So just after Serapis, which is next up. Okay, can we get a reader for the next paragraph, please?
Sorry, Martha, can you read that? You're self-muted. There you go.
Sure. The Gnostic viewpoint concerning the Christ is well worthy of consideration. This order claimed to be the only sect to have actual pictures of the divine Syrian. While these were, in all probability, idealistic conceptions of the Savior based upon existing sculpturings and paintings of the pagan sun gods, they were all Christianity had. To the Gnostics, the Christ was the personification of Nous, the divine mind, and emanated from the higher spiritual eons. He descended into the body of Jesus at baptism and left it again before the crucifixion. The Gnostics declared that the Christ was not crucified, as this divine Nous could not suffer death, but that Simon the Cyrenian offered his life instead, and that the Nous, by means of its power, caused Simon to resemble Jesus. Irenaeus makes the following statement concerning the cosmic sacrifice of the Christ. When the uncreated, unnamed Father saw the corruption of mankind, he sent his firstborn, Nous, into the world in the form of Christ, for the redemption of all who believe in him, out of the power of those that have fabricated the world, the demiurgus, the six suns, the planetary genii. He appeared amongst men as the man Jesus and wrought miracles. See King's Gnostics and their remains.
Thanks, Martha. So any thoughts or questions on this connection with the Christ?
I don't think Irenaeus, I think over time Irenaeus's perspective was canceled.
How do you mean?
I have to check to be sure. Irenaeus was one of the early fathers of the church, and
Right.
later ones.
Later ones.
Yeah, when they had an esteemed father like Irenaeus, who was, I think they're canonized in hindsight, but that they didn't call them heretics and vilify them the way they did with normal, ordinary people. They just kind of ignored it, overlooked it, and then somebody later said something else, which is that the Christ actually is not an emissary of God, but God itself.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, I know that Irenaeus was one of the ones that really went after the Gnostics and tried to destroy all their source material. So at some point, he chose to be a part of that group that codified the Christian belief system.
Doesn't this sound like he was a part of the Gnostic? He was really speaking for the Gnostic perspective here.
Yeah, it does.
So maybe he began as a Gnostic, and then, as you said,
yeah,
like Paul, had this conversion, and they become the worst crusaders. What they were once.
Yeah. Yep, I think must have been what happened. Let's see, I'm rereading his quote here. Yeah. Of course, he could be here. He could be quoting what he knows about what the Gnostics thought, rather than his own belief. It's hard to determine for sure. But at any rate, this description of the Christ is in accord with theosophical beliefs to a point. Christ is the Son of Man, Manas, mind, who could not suffer death, overshadowing Jesus. But theosophy does not support the idea that Simon the Cyrenian was crucified in Jesus's place. In traditional Christian belief, Simon carried Jesus's cross. And as they came out, they found a man of Cyrene. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Simon by name. Him they compelled to bear his cross. Now, this could be, a blind for a deeper connection. Here's a quote supposedly spoken by Jesus from the second treatise of the great Seth of Gnostic origin. Could we get a reader for this?
I'll read it. For my death, which they think happened to them in their error and blindness, since they nailed their man unto their death. It was another, their father, who drank the gall and the vinegar. It was not I. They struck me with the reed. It was another, Simon, who bore the cross on his shoulder. It was another upon whom they placed the crown of thorns. And I was laughing at their ignorance.
Okay. This is really interesting. You can see the connection, between the overshadowing Christ, that whole idea, and if the Christ remained untouched in that overshadowing position, right? But then he says, I was struck with the reed, but it was another Simon, et cetera, who bore the cross on his shoulders. And this last line, which suggests that Jesus would laugh at Simon's plight, seems particularly improbable. There's just something not quite right about this. As is so often found in surviving examples of ancient doctrine of whatever school, we have a mix of eso and exoteric content. But given the overall esoteric orientation of Gnostic scripture, most probably, this is just my opinion, secret Gnostic teachings supported the concept of the Christ overshadowing Jesus. Especially when you read the Pistis Sophia, which we'll be looking at in a little bit. It's just so esoteric in its orientation, you can't imagine that they would miss that concept of the overshadowing, though they don't state it per se. Anyway, next up, reader, please.
Okay, Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. The Gnostics divided humanity into three parts. Those who, as savages, worshipped only the visible nature. Those who, like the Jews, worshipped the demiurgus, and lastly, themselves were others of a similar cult, including certain sects of Christians who worship Nous, Christ, and the true spiritual light of the higher aeons. After the death of
Basilides. Yes.
Basilides,
Yeah, that's my guess.
okay,
Or Basilides.
Valentinus became the leading inspiration of the Gnostic movement. He still further complicated the system of Gnostic philosophy by adding infinitely to the details. He increased the number of emanations from the Great One, the Abbess, to 15 pairs, and also laid much emphasis upon the Virgin Sophia, or wisdom. In the books of the Savior, parts of which are commonly known as the Pistis Sophia, may be found much material concerning this strange doctrine of aeons and their strange inhabitants. James Freeman Clarke, in speaking of the doctrines of the Gnostics, says, "These doctrines, strange as they seem to us, had a wide influence in the Christian church. Many of the theories of the ancient Gnostics, especially those concerning scientific subjects, have been substantiated by modern research. Several sects branched off from the main stem of Gnosticism, such as the Valentinians and the Ophites, serpent worshippers, and the Adamites."
Okay, let's take a look at the Pistis Sophia, arguably the most important of the surviving Gnostic scriptures. So important, in fact, that towards the end of her life, HPB delivered a whole series of lectures on this scripture. Remember the syzygies that we discussed during the last webinar? Well, in similar fashion, Pistis Sophia was considered by the Gnostics to be the syzygy or form aspect of Jesus. And that's critical to the understanding of the Gospel of Pistis Sophia. Now, the first and last of what the Pistis Sophia describes as the 12 female eons of the dodecad, represented here by the dodecahedron, are respectively Pistis and Sophia. That's on the top, that's that face that's facing slightly away from us, which is exactly opposite of the face where the Sophia at the bottom is, right? So you can see that the dodecahedron is an apt figure for describing the 6 pairs of syzygies, right? So Pistis is the soul on its own plane. That's the highest, the first of these female eons. And Sophia, knowledge of the soul by the incarnated Jiva, is the 12th or lowest. In the fall, quote unquote, of Pistis Sophia and her rescue by her syzygy Jesus, we see the continuously reenacted drama of the suffering and ignorant personality, which can only be saved by the immortal soul, in accord with the personality's efforts to respond to the soul. Pistis Sophia's journey of redemption represents the path of return in terms of the evolution of mind. This journey, the so-called Sophia mythos, described in the Pistis Sophia, was pivotal to the whole Gnostic doctrine. Modern theosophy describes this evolution in terms of establishing a free flow of energy between the intuition, the soul, mind, and brain consciousness of the disciple, as described in A Glamour, A World Problem. This is literally the teaching that these two stations or syzygies called Pistis and Sophia are represent in these teachings. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Rebecca, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. Well, I'm not getting Rebecca, so Trudy, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted, Trudy. There you go.
Okay. Through alignment and subsequent contact, the intuition is evoked, awakened and used. This is the great dispelling agency and pours down from the plane of the intuition, the plane of Buddhi, through the soul and the brain to the heart of the disciple.
So that's the level of pistis, of the duality. Go ahead.
Second, through alignment and subsequent contact, the energy of the soul is evoked, awakened and used. This is the great dissipating agency and pours down from soul level, in brackets the higher levels of the mental plane, through the mind to the brain and the disciple, carrying illumination to the astral plane. 3. These two types of spiritual energy work differently upon the forces of the personality, and their purpose and activity have to be realized in the brain consciousness of the disciple as he works upon the physical plane. From Glamour, A World Problem, 43.
Thank you. Here's a quote from the Theosophical magazine Quest, describing the content of the Pistis Sophia gospel. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Okay. Let me see. Maria, can you read that for us, please?
I felt you were going to ask me. In the text of Sophia Pistis, after Jesus returns from the heights, shining most exceedingly, the disciples ask him to withdraw his light glory, and then ask, Rabbi, where didst thou go? Jesus replies, rejoice and exult from this hour on, for I have gone to the regions from whence I came forth. Jesus then recounts his entire journey, from region to region, starting from the moment that he saw Mary, his mother, according to the material body, and then going through the firmament, the sphere, the providence, and the 12 eons. He narrates that all the archons and the powers therein were agitated and afraid because of his exceeding light, And he went on bringing order into their regions until he came to the 13th aeon. At that point, he finds Pistis Sophia alone, below her place of origin. And he describes how the Pistis Sophia worked her way out of chaos with his help.
So you really need nothing more than this to see the esoteric implications, and you find nothing of this journey in the New Testament. So in here, it's an expanded eonological, it's not a word you use every day, eonological chart from theosophical.org. And the value in this chart is that it correlates Gnostic and Theosophical terms and ideas, with the latter, the Theosophical part, in parentheses. Here we have a description of the 13th eon, where Jesus found and, quote, rescued Pistis Sophia. But let's take it from the top. The ineffable is the first logos, not the theosophical absolute. Anupadaka means self-produced or spontaneously generated. This next group is associated with the four highest planes of the cosmic physical plane, the Adi, Logoic, Atmic, and Buddhic planes. Notice that the Atmic is the first mystery looking within, and the Buddhic is the first mystery looking without. Because it's on the Buddhic plane, the great light of lights is probably the light of the intuition. Next, the treasury of the light, also called the pleroma, is higher manas. The treasury of the light suggests to me the causal body, which may be one reason for the strong focus on the pleroma in Gnostic thought. Then we switch to the right column, which demonstrates the realm of personality, starting with lower manas, the abode of Pistis Sophia. If you remember, he found her below her place of origin. Then the helic or astral plane, and finally the physical plane, chaos and the outer darkness. Going deeper into the specifics listed in this chart is, of course, beyond the scope of this series, but if you're drawn to Gnostic thought, there's some wonderful ideas to explore here. Many of them deeply theosophical ideas, but they're given with a different slant and in a different language. Any thoughts or questions about this cosmology of the Pistis Sophia?
Well, while everybody's thinking about that, Leslie had a comment about your dodecahedron. She says it would be interesting to have Gloria Crook or Marty Cockrell from the Robert Mueller School of Ageless Wisdom in Texas to comment on the dodecahedron and the tetrahedron, etc. Dr. Mueller used these throughout his World Core curriculum in peace education and global education. Gloria is in her 90s and she still speaks about these topics.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. Really interesting. Yeah, the dodecahedron is considered the transcendent Platonic solid, 12-sided. It was hidden. It was a secret doctrine in the Platonic times. Only the initiated could know about it, right? I mean, you could just the inherent qualities of it, like it made up of a series of pentagons. There's so much esoteric thought inherent in this figure. It's just an extraordinary figure. It also interrelates to every other, holds within itself every other Platonic solid can be drawn from this amazing figure. I actually did a presentation at the last conference on this figure, the dodecahedron. You might be able to find it on makara.us. I don't know. Are those conference lectures available on Makara?
No, not yet, but we're working on getting them available. The people who did attend were given the links for the Google Drive to look at it, but the rest of you have, but it's in the works. So
it's in the works. Good.
Okay, and then also Karsten has his hand up. So
yes, Karsten.
Karsten, go ahead.
Can you explain the mystery looking within in the first space at Atma, the first mystery Atma, and then in the second mystery looking without? What's that meaning?
Well, it's you have the Atma is the will of God aspect, which is oriented towards the monad, specifically linked. You could call it the specific vehicle of the monad. And the Buddhi is the realm of the soul, and so it in a sense belongs to that second principle, and thus is looking down into the realm of soul / personality. Now that's just a guess because I'm not a Gnostic expert. These have very specific meanings, and I didn't. I'm not a master of Gnostic thought, but that's how it occurs to me. You have a real dividing line here between the third plane with the Atmic, which is oriented towards the upper three, and then the 4 through 7 being the first plane of that which is part of the manifestation of the higher three. That's probably the best I can do. Anybody have any a better explanation of what that might be? No, jump in there, guys.
Well, we do have a hand, but it was up before you asked that question, so.
Okay. Well, think about it. If you have it, jump in.
Okay. Trudy, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention about the dodecahedron. It relates to the element ether and divine compassion.
Yes. Yeah, it's, often called the fifth element, yeah. As to the divine compassion, I don't know that specific reference, but yeah, the ethers are ultimately the four highest subplanes of the cosmic physical plane, and you certainly would have the source of divine compassion in that place. Anyone else? No?
I don't.
No one wants to take a stab at the looking within and looking without?
I think Scott's probably the only brave one that would try that, but his hand is not up yet. Oh, Martha, go ahead.
Not claiming to know, is it possible that what is being alluded to here is that if the Atmic level, which looks within, actually is contemplating this essential beingness of all, the hologram, so the essence of divine self-consciousness?
Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah, you have Atma Buddhi Manas, and Atma being the highest point is going to be that point of the expression of deity, right? And so it's a looking within place as I see it. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and so the confusion lies in when we look within, we think of looking at something very, very small, but looking within here alludes to something total, complete.
Oh yeah.
The opposite.
This is you could, the way I interpret it is directionally, it would be looking towards the higher planes and towards deity would be within. It's, the paradigm here is the point at the center of the circle being the source, and through that point lie all the higher realities. So in that sense, it's a looking within, looking towards the center, you could say, as opposed to looking without, being towards the perimeter or the periphery. But it has to do with, the soul on its own plane is described as reaching in both directions, right? One eye towards deity or its own source, the monad, and one eye towards the personality, its expression in the outer world. And it could be that what's being described here is in Atma and Buddhi, is the delineation between that upward reaching and downward reaching.
Steiner also operates with three souls: the one who looks against the spirits, and then the one in the middle, and then the one who is in contact with the body. So he operates also with three souls. That's what I hear you saying now.
Yeah, that's a common three principles of theosophy. That central place, which is the second principle, the solar level, which is connected to both extremes. Thank you for that question. It's great because I think that's one of the most exciting parts of this chart. Of course, you have to be of a certain type to be excited by this chart, but to me, it is. Yeah, I see another hand.
Hey, took him a while, but go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, well, Not much to say. I'm just looking at what does the first mystery refer? It's mentioned several times, and you have to go up a line, I think, to the mystery of the ineffable. So it's in reference always to that of the ineffable, the first space and second space.
Yeah.
And looking at within the first mystery and without. I don't know. I think your definition, your description is pretty good.
Well, you know, if you look at the mystery singular of the ineffable logos, you could look at that as, you know, on the logoic plane, which would be similar to the, you know, that third logos place, you know, that the source of our being, you know, from an outer point of view. But then right above it, it goes plural of the ineffable, which it seems to me it diffuses the singularity, you know, the quality of, it moves into the realm of the, not the absolute, but more of the unmanifest. Of course, the actual unmanifest is at the very top of the chart, right? And then you also have just the plurality, which you have the mystery and then a further series of mysteries, suggesting maybe the mysteries of all creation everywhere, you know. I don't know.
Needs more investigation, more input.
Yeah, again, you know, the little brackets really help us because you have, you know, the three planes described, or, you know, all the 4 planes described in this section that we're looking at. And that really helps orient us, right? But it doesn't, of course, at all fully explain what's going on here. Yeah, like what is the first space of the first mystery? Well, space can be seen as a kind of form aspect, as a container, right? And that is in keeping with the idea of Atma being, you know, the expression of the will aspect of the logos, you know, just as Buddhi is the expression of the love aspect of the logos, or the monad. So, yeah.
I think it's interesting down below. Melchizedek is so far down the line. And what the things underneath it mean, who knows? But that's interesting placement.
Yeah, I just don't, it's not our Melchizedek, you know, it's not the Ancient of Days who is the Sanat Kumara at this level, you know, so there's, you know, there's another reference here. You'd have to go to the biblical reference to see what's meant here. That's how I see it. The 7 amens or voices may be the 7 vowels, which are so often described, for instance, in Oiaohu, right? These 7 sacred sounds, which are the expressions of the 7 from the one, right? So at this level, we're looking at the voices, the actual outer expression of those, you could say, causal sounds or vowels, right? And it's interesting the way it's under Melchizedek, as though these 7, 5, and 3 belong to Melchizedek. I often say Melchizedek, which is not right. And who knows? You know, that, I mean, who knows what that could be. Again, this is very specifically Gnostic, and it would take a deep study. And I haven't done that deep study to know this. Okay, yeah. Anyone else? Anything else? It's a
Yes.
a right field. Yeah.
Georgina has her hand up. Go ahead, Georgina. You're self-muted. There.
Oh, hello. Can you tell me, please, if there's a relationship between the great light of lights on the left-hand side and the Virgin of Light on the right-hand side?
I think of this great light of lights as the illumination that informs the intuition, right? It actually has its source on atmic levels, because remember, as a light, it is an emanation from the source, which keeps it from being up at this level up here. And then you said in relation to the Virgin of the Light, is that what you said?
Yes.
Virgin of Light, yeah.
Virgin of Light.
Get back there. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, this is the realm of Pistis Sophia over here. And in this, I would say that her original source, remember, Jesus comes looking for her because she has descended into this realm. Now, of course, she's a metaphor for the personality, which is feminine in that it's the form aspect. And so, but there's more to it than just that. You know, you can get real glib about this stuff. But she is that Jesus rescues her from this realm. This is the highest on the right here. Let me go back up. I think I got, yeah, here we go. This is the realm of lower manas, right? And so in this place, we're talking about one whose source is this light. So I think yeah, there's a connection. It's the same light. That is to say, the source of this person who has been engulfed in the on the psychic plane is the same light, but it's not being demonstrated here. That's how I see it anyway. At least not until she reconnects with her opposite, her syzygy in Jesus, and then is led back into the light, which is the light of every one of our souls, and then becomes expressive of that inherent light, right? That's one possible explanation. You know, like I say, we're just having a conversation here. Anyone else? Okay. Onward. Let's finish the paragraph, and with it, MPH's section on Gnosticism. Could we get a reader, please?
Michael, can you read that for us, please?
Here we go. After the 3rd century, their power waned, and the Gnostics practically vanished from the philosophic world. An effort was made during the Middle Ages to resurrect the principles of Gnosticism, but owing to the destruction of their records, the material necessary was not available. Even today, there are evidences of Gnostic philosophy in the modern world, but they bear other names, and their true origin is not suspected. Many of the Gnostic concepts have actually been incorporated into the dogmas of the Christian Church, and our newer interpretations of Christianity are often along the lines of Gnostic emanationism.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, as a piece of trivia, John Lennon said, if there's any true Christianity, it's in the Gnostic. Any thoughts or questions about Gnosticism in general? It's, you know, it's a bit fragmented because it's our presentation is over the last 3 webinars. If you want to get a holistic sense of it, you know, revisit those webinars on YouTube, and you can get a more cohesive understanding. Certainly theosophy supports emanationism. It's that last phrase there. In fact, it's such an important theosophical tenet that it is used as an indicator to determine how esoteric other spiritual doctrines are. On this and many other fronts, Gnosticism shows itself to be a profoundly occult, ageless wisdom teaching, really worthy of further study. The Gnostics and Their Remains gives us an account of Gnosticism's enduring influence. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Yes, Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
But indeed, Gnosticism in its primitive form had almost supplanted by spiritualizing itself, the beautiful materialism of the early Greek and Latin mythologies. Catholicism, through its unity and greater simplicity, in the end triumphed over the conflicting Gnostic philosophies, which became extinct as a professed religion in the 6th century, so far as Europe was concerned, and whose relics in Asia were at the same moment covered over with impenetrable obscurity by the sudden deluge of the Mohammedan conquest. Nevertheless, even in the first named scene of its domination, it was not to be eradicated without leaving behind it deep traces in the writings and symbolisms of the magicians, astrologers, and seekers after the grand arcanum through the whole course of the Middle Ages.
Thank you, Carrie. So, as mentioned in the last 2 secret teaching webinars, Gnosticism has had a resurgence through the discoveries at Nag Hammadi. I offered this link in the last webinar. If you're interested in exploring Gnosticism, that's a great place to go. There's a number of really fascinating doctrines in that discovery, unavailable at the time of Manly Hall. Certainly he would have been quoting from them and bringing them forth had they been around, but he missed them by about 20 years. So let's take a look.
That link,
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
That link is in the chat box, and if you don't see it, if you arrived after I did, after I pasted it in there and you need me to paste it again, just send me a little chat and I'll do that. And also, before we move on, Maria's got her hand up.
All right.
Go ahead, Maria.
Hi. Francis, I'm wondering what the connection might be to Gnosticism and the current sect of Coptic in Egypt.
I think they were deeply connected at the time. You know, the Coptics also underwent a lot of persecution. In fact, it still goes on. But you know, I'm not that familiar with Coptic thought. I visited in fact, I have a great story, but I won't tell you. It's about staying at a Coptic monastery. I spent the night against the walls of this monastery fortress out in the middle of the desert, and then they let me in the morning, and I attended a ceremony, or it was a church service is really what it was. It was at 4 a.m, and there were no seats. You stood, but other than that, which suggests its monastic quality, it seemed to me very much Christian in its orientation. That is traditional Christian, but I haven't studied it enough to really answer that question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does anybody else have some understanding? Martha, do you have some awareness of the Coptic, the difference in the Coptic belief?
She had to step away for a little bit. She said she'll be back.
Oh, she did. Okay. she might. She has some scholarship in this area, so she might know. But yeah, they're quite early. You know, they were the first local church. You know, from the area. The Coptics came right out of that Middle East area. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so let's take a look at this illustration. This tiny little illustration here. Here we have the sun, a solar dragon of wisdom, exalted in Leo. Could we get a reader for this? That's of course, the bigger print on the right side. I didn't bother to retype it because I think it's readable enough there. That's Montfaucon, from Montfaucon's Antiquities.
Okay, just that one part, the lion-faced light power.
Yeah, you could read it.
This Gnostic gem represents by its serpentine body the pathway of the sun, and by its lion head the exaltation of the solar orb in the constellation of Leo.
Okay. So its serpents and lion-headedness ties this gem to the Zoroastrian god Zurvan. You know, that was the parent religion to Mithraism, which we spent a couple of webinars on. The initiatory rites of Mithraism, to Heracles' victory over the Nemean lion, and as we'll discover in the next segment, the strange triple-headed companion animal of Serapis. In fact, lion, bull, and serpent were intimately interconnected in all the creator gods found around the Mediterranean. A part of this is astrological significances, and there's a lot of mystery to their meanings. I couldn't find the image described in this quote, but there are literally dozens of lion versus bull motifs, like this monumental depiction from Persepolis. Could we get a reader for this?
Rebecca, can you read that for us? You're self-muted. Nope, I'm not getting anything from her. Scott, can you read that for us, please?
You're talking to me?
Yes, please.
Sure. To come now to the actual types setting forth these ideas. Prominent among them is the figure of the lion, he being in astrological parlance the house of the sun, usually surrounded with stars and carrying in his jaws a bull's head, emblem of earth subjected to his power. Sometimes he tramples on the serpent, which in this connection no longer typifies wisdom, but the principle of evil.
Thank you, Scott. Do you have any thoughts about that astrologically? I noticed that there are two of the fixed signs.
Well, you throw in the serpent, you have Scorpio, and what's missing as always is the man in Aquarius.
The top, in Aquarius, yeah. So it's a form of, well, you know, we see this. It's, what do they call it? The zoology of the New Testament, but it's, you know, far predates that. Yeah, it's the four fixed signs.
And it's usually the lion, again, as it says here, taking down the bull, or the serpent being the supreme power of the sun, and beyond that of Sirius, which I think is really, it's the sun, but it's a blind for Sirius. Leo, the lion, the sun behind that, Sirius behind that.
Okay, yeah. Makes sense. Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts? I see a hand up.
Yes, Maria. Go ahead, Maria.
Yeah, I was wondering, in the body of the lion, there's an S form there. I'm wondering if that's the serpent.
Oh, good catch. I think you may have something there. That certainly looks
There's also a wing coming out of that area too on the body of the lion.
Yeah, the winged lion. Yeah. And that's like where my little cursor is. That's looks like a serpent's head there. Good
Yeah.
eye. Good eye. I didn't even catch that at all. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, that
Good one.
might be those three signs.
So there you have it. And as Scott said, the man, which is the symbol of the Aquarius, is often missing when this is depicted.
Mm-hmm.
It's perhaps that goes back to when there were only 10 signs known in the zodiac. And ended in Capricorn.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But it's also the angels, the cherubs, the four angels.
I didn't understand that. Before.
The four angels, the lion,
yeah.
the angel, yeah, the cherub, the big angels, yeah.
Yeah.
Cherubs.
Seraphs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
These angels, we often use them in ceremonies. When you call the lion and the Taurus and the serpent, that's not the serpent, that's the what they call it, Scorpio. Yeah. And the man, yeah. That's the four angels.
Okay, interesting.
They are represented everywhere in the tarot cards, everywhere. If you look at that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you find them in the 21st card represented in the four corners. It's called the World, which here in Manly Hall is calling, the bull. The bull's head, the symbol of the earth, with the sun having it in its jaws, right? It's just another way of depicting the scene we see here. And it'd be interesting, yeah. It almost suggests a directionality, like you start with the sun and then go to Taurus and then go across to Scorpio and then up to Aquarius. I'm not sure. Of course, there's many ways to look at it, but the fact of the dominance of the lion over the bull is can be read as a way of looking at them directionally. See a hand. Vial?
Yes, I'm sorry. Scott, I'll get to you in just a minute. Rebecca asks, is the serpent or snake Teth connected to strength in tarot, which includes Leo?
Yeah, that's a really interesting. See, there's another connection between the lion and the serpent right there, and it's connected to it. It's interesting too because there's a switching between the 8th and 11th arcanum between this strength aspect, right? But the strength is the strength of wisdom in the serpent, and then it's that strength demonstrated outwardly in the lion. Yeah, Scott or whoever's next.
Right, Scott. Go ahead.
I don't see the serpent in that. I see that as the musculature of the front arm, the paw. I don't see that. What's important to me there is the wing, which takes it out of a terrestrial lion into a divine, a solar one. It always kicks it up into space, as it were, when you add the wings to it over a domestic or a earthly bull.
Yeah, well, you can immediately take it into the realm of air, yeah, which, as you say, it moves it. And the air being indicative of the highest of the elements, you know, with the Buddhic plane. Yeah, that's a good observation. Anyone else? All right. Okay. The next section within the Ancient Mysteries and Secret Teachings, Part 2, is called The Mysteries of Asar Hapi. But before we get into the text, let's take a look at the etymology of the name of this enigmatic god. The original Egyptian name was actually SJRHP. I have no idea how to pronounce that, which was later written in Coptic as Usur Hapi, the name also used by the Greeks. The Egyptologist E.A. Wallace Budge translated the original hieroglyph as Asar Hapi, which is the name MPH chose for this section. It was actually much later, under the Ptolemaic pharaohs in Roman-ruled Egypt, Alexandria. They were centered in Alexandria, that this god became Serapis, the new Serapis, right? Could we get a reader for this quote from the Gnostics?
Karen, can you read that for us? Karen G., can you read that for us, please?
Serapis is depicted as a man with the head of a bull and carrying the ensigns of which we usually recognize Osiris. The god of Alexandria, therefore, differs in form as widely as in origin from the original patron of Thebes, with whom he has no other affinity than in name, and that rests only on the arbitrary interpretation of the Egyptian priests, so successful in persuading the Greeks that the mythology of the whole world was but a plagiarism from their own.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, he was, even though there was some reference to this Asar Hapi in much earlier times, there was a reference to him as Serapis. Well, Ser means fire, Apis is the bull. And so you have the fire in the bull, which is the soul in the personality, right? But this Serapis of Alexandria really came from a different origin. Okay. To make things more confusing, Serapis, as many of you know, is also mentioned by Master Dwal Kul in the Alice Bailey books. So we'll start our survey of this section on Serapis with this quote from Initiation Human and Solar. Can we get a reader?
Yes, Maria, can you read that for us, please?
With pleasure. One other master may here be briefly mentioned, the Master Serapis, frequently called the Egyptian. He is the master upon the fourth ray and the great art movements of the world, the evolution of music and that of painting and drama, receive from him an energizing impulse. At present, he is giving most of his time and attention to the work of the Diva, or angelic evolution, until their agency helps to make possible the great revolution in the world of music and painting which lies immediately ahead. More about him cannot be given out, nor can his dwelling place be revealed.
Okay, no more about him couldn't be given out in Initiation Human and Solar, but down the line, there's precious little, but there is this fascinating quote from Telepathy in the Etheric Vehicle. Could we get a reader for this? This also brings it up to modern times, which is always interesting.
Yvonne, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. An illustration of this is to be found in the history of the League of Nations. Before he took up special work, the Master Serapis sought to bring through some constructive idea for the helping of humanity. He conceived of a world unity in the realm of politics, which would work out as an intelligent banding of the nations for the preservation of international peace. He presented it to the adepts in conclave, and it was felt that something could be done. The Master Jesus undertook to present it to his group of disciples as he was working in the Occident. One of his disciples on the inner planes seized upon the suggestion and passed it on, or rather stepped it down, until it registered in the brain of Colonel House. He, not recording the source of which he was totally unaware, passed it on in turn to that sixth ray aspirant called Woodrow Wilson. Then, fed by the wealth of analogous ideas in the minds of many, it was presented to the world. It should be borne in mind that the function of a disciple is to focus a stream of energy of some special kind upon the physical plane, where it can become an attractive center of force and draw to itself similar types of ideas and thought currents, which are not strong enough to live by themselves or to make a sufficiently strong impact upon the human consciousness, from telepathy and the etheric vehicle.
Yeah, that's just a fascinating paragraph, especially for those of you who study the Bailey books. It's just full of hints as to the way that the hierarchy works through the masters and how things make their way, into manifestation. It's such a fourth-rate thing to do, this preservation of international peace. Where does he say here? Yeah, he conceived of a world unity in the realm of politics. It's, this orientation towards harmony and unity of the fourth ray. It's really present here. Okay, final reference in all the Bailey books to Serapis concerns, quote, 7 stanzas from one of the most ancient volumes in the world, which deals with the 7-ray causes of imperfections in our planetary manifestations. Referencing these stanzas, the Master Serapis states in Esoteric Healing that they, the stanzas, can only be studied and considered when humanity has reached such a stage of intuitive development that men can, quote, appreciate causes and effects as whole processes and can see both the beginning and the end in one flash of time and space. DK then comments on this quote by saying, in these words, the Master Serapis once summed up the matter when endeavoring to train a group of initiated disciples in this mode of approaching vast subjects. Now, if you're looking for the definition of esoteric, there it is. Appreciate causes and effects as whole processes and can see both the beginning and the end in one flash of time in space. Okay, and that's it on any reference to Serapis. 3 tantalizing glimpses into his nature. That's all we have from the Master DK. Now we have to ask ourselves, is the Theosophical Master Serapis, this fourth ray master, the same as the Roman Egyptian god Serapis? No. For as you will see, the god Serapis is another third logos creator god, like Abraxas and Mithras. But they must surely be connected in some profound way, just through their name and by the fact that both were r/Egyptian before and after the time of Christ. So
you have a hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Scott.
Just going back to this Master Serapis, I recall that there is kept in theosophical literature someplace numerous letters written by this master to Colonel Olcott in red pencil, as he did, and they are kept someplace.
Wow. How extraordinary. I wasn't aware of that source. That would be, very interesting. Okay, so with this theosophical introduction, let's take a look at MPH's writing on Serapis. Could we get a reader for the beginning of this section?
Scott, can you read that for us?
Okay. The mysteries of Asar Hapi. The identity of the Greco-Roman Serapis, known to the Greeks as Serapis and the Egyptians as Asar Hapi, is shrouded by an impenetrable veil of mystery. While this deity was a familiar figure among the symbols of the secret Egyptian initiatory rites, his arcane nature was revealed only to those who had fulfilled the requirements of the Serapic cultus. Therefore, in all probability, excepting the initiated priests, the Egyptians themselves were ignorant of his true character. So far as known, there exists no authentic account of the rites of Serapis, but an analysis of the deity and his accompanying symbols reveals their salient points. In an oracle delivered to the king of Cyprus, Serapis describes himself thus: "A god I am, such as I show to thee. The starry heavens are my head, my trunk the sea. Earth forms my feet, my ears the air supplies. The sun far darting, brilliant rays, mine eyes."
Yes. Thanks, Scott. Any thoughts or questions about this first paragraph? MPH almost certainly got this quote from the Gnostics and the Remains. I say that because just before this quote in that book is a description of a statue of Serapis at Alexandria. Immediately following this quote is that poetic quote. So could we get a reader for this?
Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The city of Alexandria pays an almost frantic worship to Serapis and Isis. Nevertheless, they show that all this veneration is merely offered to the sun under that name, both by their placing the corn measure upon his head, and by accompanying his statue with the figure of an animal having 3 heads. Of these heads, the middle and the largest one is a lion. That which rises on the right is a ox in a peaceable and fawning attitude, whilst the left part of the neck terminates in that of a ravening wolf. All these bestial forms are connected together by the wreathed body of a serpent, which raises its head up towards the god's right hand. From Gnosis and their Remains.
Thank you, Trudy. The cult of
Gnostics.
Yeah. The cult of Serapis predated Gnosticism and Mithraism by 3 to 4 centuries. Writing in 323 BC, Plutarch mentions a temple of Serapis, making it concurrent with Aristotle and possibly even Plato. By the time the Neoplatonist Plotinus lived and taught in Alexandria, the cult of Serapis was the dominant influence there. Because of the lack of info on the Serapian doctrine itself, we'll never know just how much cross-pollination occurred between Neoplatonism, Mithraism, Gnosticism, and the Serapian or Serapian doctrine. Though based on their similar symbolic use of, for instance, lions, bulls, and serpents, we can infer that there were many shared understandings, beliefs. Here's a photo of the remains of the Serapis of Alexandria, a pendant bearing Serapis's likeness, and a 2nd century AD bronze votive tablet inscribed to Serapis. Next up.
Francis?
Yeah.
I just wanted to tell you that I found a couple of references when I Googled it on the, from the Theosophical Society on those letters that Scott mentioned from Serapis to Olcott, and I put two links in the chat box for people to look it up. So thank you, Scott.
Okay.
And I hope the links help anybody who wants to pursue it further.
Yeah, for the hardcore among us, that's terrific. Okay, can we get a reader for this?
Yes, let's go to Martha. Can you read that for us? You're self-muted. Thank you.
Let's see where we are. Several unsatisfactory attempts have been made to etymologize the word Serapis. Godfrey Higgins notes that Soros was the name given by the Egyptians to a stone coffin, and Apis was Osiris incarnate in the sacred bull. These two words combined result in Soroapis or Sorapis, the tomb of the bull. But it is improbable that the Egyptians would worship a coffin in the form of a man. Several ancient authors, including Macrobius, have affirmed that Serapis was a name for the sun because his image so often had a halo of light about its head. In his oration upon the sovereign sun, Julian speaks of the deity in these words: one Jove, one Pluto, one sun is Serapis. In Hebrew, Serapis is Saraph, meaning to blaze out or to blaze up. For this reason, the Jews designated one of their hierarchies of spiritual beings, seraphim.
Any thoughts or questions about this paragraph?
It does bring to mind this cross-pollination that you had mentioned earlier, Mike, Francis.
Yeah. Yeah, the more we read, I mean, even starting way back and with the English, and the Celts, we've seen similar symbols, similar animals, being used by literally every mystery school, from the Druids through the Mithraics, the Gnostics, and now, the Serapis. There was a esoteric code that seems to have underlined all these disciplines, right?
Francis?
Yeah.
Sorry. Karsten adds that the cherub angels also have the 4 heads of the lion, Taurus, eagle, Scorpio, man, Aquarius.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Right. It's the fixed cross.
Right. And then you have a number of hands up. So let's go to Scott first, and then we'll go to Joan afterwards. Go ahead, Scott.
At some point, I assume you'll talk about the Serapium down south of the pyramids that we went to, the giant coffins of the bulls that were buried in the ground. At some point, you'll get to that.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, the reason being that it really is the Asar Hapi or Usar Hapi element of Serapis. It is not the Alexandrian Serapis, the Ptolemaic pharaohs. It was really a different understanding and different worship. It would be, the extended course. However, I will say this, that there's a bunch of sections coming up on Egypt. In fact, 4 and I think they're introduced in this lecture, but there's 4 whole sections that have to do with the Egyptian mysteries. And so I'm sure that at that point that we'll be taking a look at that.
I think trying to line up that site with Ptolemaic Egypt and Alexandria is a really misconception, total travesty of the time that actually, when they were actually put there, they're not related, I don't believe, at all in terms of time. Serapium underground there is far older. That's really, really ancient.
Oh, yeah. It's just when it came into, this externalized movement, actually started in Persepolis, and we'll get to that. There was a statue, and the pharaoh had a dream about it, but this is coming up in the text, and had it moved, and that happened on a very specific date, something like 305 BC, so that really starts that cult in Alexandria. But the Egyptian, Asarhapi, Serapis, as you say, Ser meaning fire and Apis meaning body, really, or bull. It's just another dualism of soul and the form that through which it can manifest. And so in that sense, it's much more abstract and goes way back into Middle Egypt at least. But in this presentation focuses on the Alexandrian Serapis.
Right. I think the Serapium that we both know of is, to me, one of the most astonishing places I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, that would be
second to the pyramid,
right.
Like that, but it's extraordinary. It's mind-blowing.
It's amazing. Yeah, if we were on Zoom, I'd switch over and bring a picture of it up, because it's unlike any other ruin in Egypt that we saw. It's unique. It's absolutely unique in its construction and in its sense of antiquity. It's amazing. All right. And of course, it's, whenever you say, oh, it must be a coincidence, of course not. There's that informed this, but not directly,
So we'll work our way back to that.
Yeah.
Over time here on this NLP.
Okay. I'm sorry, Scott, what were you saying?
Go on.
Okay, I missed that last part. So worship of the Taurian bull.
Hold it. We have another hand up.
Okay.
Go ahead, Joan. You're self-muted.
I may have been thinking of exactly the same space that Scott was, the Serapis at Saqqara. Is that the one you were talking about?
That's right.
Yeah. I was just there in March.
Oh.
And in a less traditional tour. And at that point, they were saying that there was special dust that had been put around the objects in those various places, and that may have been a special dust, and that was what a secret was all about, that they were trying to hide some things, and there was a special formula that only more recently, in very recent times, have they discovered this special substance again. Anyway.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I have no idea about that particular teaching, but it's an extraordinary place. It's very much worth like you say, going off the beaten path to see it. It's quite special. Anyone else?
No, that's it for right now.
Okay. So, worship of the Taurian bull as a vehicle of the gods and as a symbol for the rejuvenation of the natural world, can be traced back to prehistory, from the caves of Lascaux and its Hall of the Bulls, to the Hindu Nandi, to the Egyptian Apis. In fact, every mystery school that we've studied so far, from the Druids to Mithras, has revered the bull and demonstrated that reverence through sacrifice of the bull, a practice that goes back at least to ancient Egypt. Let's see. Yeah, could we get a reader for this, please?
Yeah, Joan, can you read that for us? You're self-muted.
Sma to cut. The descriptive formula on Egyptian tablets dedicated to Osiris and to some other deities is so worded as to leave no doubt respecting the nature of the most important Egyptian sacrifices, in which we find oxen and geese with cakes and wine, incense and libation invariably mentioned, flowers and herbs being presented as a separate oblation. The sanction given for sacrificing a bull was by papyrus band, tied by the priest round the horns, which he stamped with his signet on sealing clay. Documents sealed with fine clay and impressed with a signet are very common, but the exact symbols impressed on it by the priest on this occasion are not known. Castor says they consisted of a man kneeling, with his hands tied behind him, and a sword pointed to his throat, which were probably the annexed, though they have not been found on a seal. Manners and Customs of the Ancient Egyptians.
Yeah, wonderful book. Yeah, so this is, I found this illustrated somewhere, and it was, pretty close to the seal's description. So this last sentence, and we're back to the paragraph here, referencing the seraphim as the possible source word for Serapis, as well as Microbius's oration, gives a strong hint that Serapis is yet another iteration of the 7-in-1 solar god. Referencing this etymology, HPV says, could we get a reader?
Yeah, Lynn, can you read that for us, please? You're self-muted. Thank you.
Then come the Nagas, the Sarpa, serpents or seraphs. These again show their character by the hidden meaning of their glyph. In mythology, they are the semi-divine beings with a human face and the tail of a dragon. They are therefore undeniably the Jewish seraphim from Serapis and Sarpa, serpent, the plural being Sarah, burning, fiery.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. So you can see the connection here. Okay, next up. Reader, please.
Michael, can you read that for us, please?
The most common theory, however, regarding the origin of the name Serapis is that which traces its derivation from the compound Osiris Apis. At one time, the Egyptians believed that the dead were absorbed into the nature of Osiris, the god of the dead. While marked similarity exists between Osiris Apis and Serapis, the theory advanced by Egyptologists that Serapis is merely a name given to a dead Apis, or sacred bull of Egypt, is untenable in view of the transcendent wisdom possessed by the Egyptian priestcraft, who, in all probability, used the god to symbolize the soul of the world, anima mundi. The material body of nature was called Apis. The soul which escaped from the body at death, but was enmeshed with the form during physical life, was designated Serapis.
Any thoughts or questions? We're starting to see a theme here, aren't we? Of this fire in connection with the form aspect. Though there is no definitive proof that Serapis is derived from Osiris Apis, as suggested by this chart, Osiris and Apis were definitely combined into one god, as shown by these sculptures. Now that's just Osiris and Apis, not Serapis, but you know, the connection is inherent, at least in my opinion. Also in Memphis, there was a god named Osorapis, we also already read, who had a strong association with the deceased Apis, thus emphasizing the essential self. The Osiris in Apis, or Osorapis, soul and form. Since this is the purported nature of Serapis, it doesn't seem much of a stretch to move from Osorapis to Serapis, with Ser, or fire, further emphasizing the solar aspect. This last sentence explains the god's inherent dualism. The material body of nature was called Apis. The soul which escaped from the body at death, but was enmeshed with the form during physical life, was designated Serapis, or the fire of, the fiery substance. Like the Hindu Nandi is to Shiva, Apis is the vehicle or form aspect of Osiris. Since MPH gives us no provenance for this statement, we might assume that it was derived from the soul form duality represented by Osiris Apis. Okay, next up. Any thoughts or questions about anything so far? Even if I don't ask for them, you're always welcome to raise your hand. I see one.
Yes. Go ahead. Oops. You're self-muted, Lynn. Go ahead.
Francis, in Master Dwakol's teachings, there is mention, this has to do with the Deva evolution too, but I think it mentions that Serapis has his attention focused not only on the Devas and their evolution, but I thought the animal kingdom as well. I'm not sure. Do you know reference to that?
No, I don't. I just know that those references we read, which associated with the David kingdom, turn his attention to it, which would include, that part of the animal kingdom that is the birds, because there's a strong vibratory connection between Devas and the bird kingdom. But I don't know. Has anybody else who, reads DK, does that sound familiar? In my word search for Serapis, we just read everything that appears in the standard 24 volumes. So I don't know beyond that. Sorry, Len. But since you're on the wire, do you want to read this?
Sure. C.W. King believes Serapis to be a deity of Brahmanic extraction, his name being the Grecianized form of Serada, or Sripa, two titles ascribed to Yama, the Hindu god of death. This appears reasonable, especially since there is a legend to the effect that Serapis, in the form of a bull, was driven by Bacchus from India to Egypt. The priority of the Hindu mysteries would further substantiate such a theory. Among other meanings suggested for the word Serapis are the sacred bull, the sun in Taurus, the soul of Osiris, the sacred serpent, and the retiring of the bull. The last appellation has reference to the ceremony of drowning the sacred Apis in the waters of the Nile every 25 years.
Thank you, Lynn. Any thoughts or questions? Here's a further quote. Yeah, so here we have this orientation to Yama. And here's a further quote from the Gnostics and the remains on the link between Serapis and the Hindu Yama. Could we get a reader, please?
Carrie, can you read that for us, please?
It is evident that upon his first introduction into Egypt, Serapis was regarded by the Alexandrians as identical with Aidoneus, or Dis, the lord of the lower world. Now, all his attributes suggest him to have been of Indian origin, and no other than Yama, lord of hell, attended by his dog Chabara, the spotted, who has the epithet Trichira, the three-headed, and by his serpent Jesser, called regent of Hades. In fact, some have discovered in the name Serapis, but the Grecian form of Yama's epithet Sarada Deva, lord of the obsequies, that is, of the funeral sacrifices offered to the Pitris or Manes. Yama also is styled Lord of Souls and Judge of the Dead, another office assimilating him to Serapis in the character under which the latter came to be specially regarded.
Thanks, Carrie. So here's Serapis, entwined by a serpent, and with his three-headed dog, in this case, dog. And here's an amazing frieze depicting Serapis and Isis, who were both worshipped in Alexandria, as it was the kind of the higher and lower mysteries as serpents of wisdom. Right? Yeah, I would give anything to know the DK connection, the master Serapis connection to the Alexandrian cult. There's just no chance that there's not a connection there. We're out of time, folks, so we'll pick up next month with we'll continue on reading about labyrinths and mazes. But for now, thanks very much. You want to give the times for the next webinars, Biel?
Sure. The next Secret Teaching of All Ages is September 6th. And next week, we have the next Secret Doctrine webinar coming up, because remember, this one here was a week late because of the full moon. So we'll hopefully see you all next Sunday. And Michael Stacy has kindly sent out the weekly events. I also put it on moirafederation.com. There's an announcement with what he puts out, and also for those in the Moira Federation, it's there on the Student Union. So we've got a lot of activities. The normal Ask, Michael's webinar events, right? So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and also, now that all these series are available on YouTube, it's really easy, without having to download them. You can just go over there, do a quick search, and if you're particularly interested in some subject we covered, you can pretty quickly find it and take a look. So okay,
they've created playlists, so they've grouped all the series together. They've done a really good job of doing that. Joe Waltz and Harold Moses, they've done a great job.
Yeah, so you could, sit at your desk, hit play, and 120 hours later, you'd be through it all.
There is a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot up there. And they'll be uploaded pretty quickly after each webinar. So, okay, it's a great privilege to host these webinars, and we hope to see you all next time, whether that's this coming Sunday or September 6th.
Yeah.
Until then.
And I also want to say we've changed the format on Makara, and we're posting MP4s now and MP3s, which means that you can listen or you can watch from the internet. You don't have to download it like you do with the older version, the Debian V files. So, if it isn't up on YouTube yet or you can't find it, you can always watch it directly from Makara. So.
Excellent. Good to
Goodbye.
know. Okay, bye
Goodbye,
now.
everybody.
See you all next time.